I've been watching Bavard play since 1944. I've seen 946 straight games. Football was king here for a long time. This place fair was full of people, 6,000 people. You could have probably robbed the bank because everybody was at the ball game.
In '63 was the year we integrated.
Oh, baby, you don't have to go. Oh, baby, what a wrong way.
We're going to stand together. We're going to sing together. We're going to stay together. We're going to moan together. We're going to groan together. And after a while, we'll say, freedom, freedom, freedom now.
I can't remember when I first found out we were going to integrate until, I guess, the first day of practice.
Never will forget that because we all showed up at a particular time. And when we got there, we noticed that everybody else had their equipment. And so suddenly we were to get our equipment. And I can't say if we got all the same equipment or not, but we were given our equipment. Back then, we thought it was quite odd, but at the same time, keep in mind, we were also told we would be trailblazers and we had to make sure that we did not do anything that would hinder that cause.
Stadium. It's time for some football here on Friday night. Let's get on your feet, fans, as we put together the Barnhouse Club Kansas.
The first game stands out more than anything. Sports writers from everywhere.
So there was a lot of shouting and stuff, calling the guys Leroy and all that kind of thing, you know.
To me, it was about Brevard. It was about Tommy Ferguson, and he was talking with Paul Struggle, and us getting this opportunity to be on this field. Keith Reginald Lynch, and we were on this team. We were on this team.
There was some dissension quite naturally until Paul touched the ball the first two times.
So I had a great night.
And once Paul turned the corner, there was nobody in the state of Tennessee or state of North Carolina was gonna catch him. And we hit the corner, man, he was gone. Boom.
After Paul scored that first touchdown, all the crowd was a little less racist than they were before. And when he scored the second touchdown, they were almost cured.
4 of those touchdowns we scored in that game was scored by black players. So that helped us to integrate, I guess. But
as a child, I grew up knowing that there were places that I couldn't go. You could not go in Varner's drugstore. You could not go in the soda joint. You could not go in and sit down and get a hamburger. I know my mother, when we would go shopping when the Belt store was downtown on East Main Street, she would wait to one side until white customers had been served, and then she would go up to the counter. But you knew that if she got something off the rack, you didn't try it on. You simply took it up and purchased it.
The theater in Brevard. And what I remember about that, we had our own entry to that theater. And our part was in the balcony. We had our own separate stairwell to the balcony. We watched the same movies that everybody else was watching, but we were in a very segregated environment.
I went with my father to pay his taxes because the tax collector's office was in the courthouse at that particular time and was there for many years after. They had a rock fountain out front that dated back, you can go back to the early 1900s and see photographs of that fountain in front of the courthouse. But next to it was a spigot. If a black person wanted a drink of water, that's what they had to use. You could not drink from that, you didn't drink from that fountain. When an individual white told me he didn't remember that, and I said, yeah, okay, I remember that. Everything that we could not avail ourselves of, and I had this conversation with my father many years later into my early adulthood, many things that we could not avail ourselves of, not so much within the social and cultural environment, but within the civic environment, within the city, things that we could not do, we still had to pay taxes.
What you don't hear as much about is the black leaders, or what I don't hear as much about, but they planned on the integration.
In Brevard, North Carolina, the community decided that they wanted to send their children to the white school, especially their high school students who had to be either transported out of the county or sent elsewhere to live in order to secure a high school education.
The black high school burnt down in Brevard, so we only had first grade to eighth grade, and after it had burnt down, and from there, the black kids was bused 21 miles a day, 42 miles a day, 21 miles one way to Hendersonville to go to 9th Avenue High School in Hendersonville.
The school board was very much opposed to integrating the schools. So they went through a group that they set up called the TCIO.
They were parents, our pastors, and community, quote unquote, community leaders at that time. They were the adults that precipitated integration. And it was a community effort.
Reuben Daly was chosen to represent the black community in Brevard in their court case demanding that the schools be integrated and their children be permitted to go to school. And he would meet with the Board of Education and say, we're expecting this to happen, and we're expecting it to happen by this time. So he pushed the board as far as he could, and then, of course, the final decision was made in court.
Right around that time was a city in Greensboro, North Carolina, and there was 4 of us that on a Sunday went to the drugstore and sat down up there also. James Madison, Tommy Ferguson, James Whitmire, and Paul Scruggs. And we didn't get served, but we stayed long enough to be
be recognized, and it wasn't long before our parents were telling us, stay in your place.
They said we were having to leave this high school and to go to another high school. All of our friends, all of our associations were at Hendersonville High School. And suddenly, we were not asked to go. We were told that we was going. we had no voice in that. And the only thing that we were told that this was going to be just great for the community. And we were told how to act, and we emphasized that everything that we did would either help or hurt the Afro-American community. And so we felt like we had all this weight upon us, but the majority of the kids did not want to go to high school in Brevard, North Carolina. We looked at what we lost, and what we lost was this. 9th Avenue High School, we had presidents of our classes, vice presidents of our classes. We had people that were doing yearbook. We had people that were taking pictures and doing all that stuff. We lost all of that when we went to Brevard High School.
Teachers lost jobs. Not one black teacher was integrated into the school system. Employees lost jobs. Cafeteria workers, janitors lost their jobs.
We used to stop at Arcadia Dairy, and they had excellent hamburgers and milkshakes there for the players that would get. And the lady that owned the place met me at the door and told me not to bring those black boys in there. She didn't call them black boys. She called them the N-word. And I said, well, we've enjoyed eating here all these years, but we won't be back. We were going to play down there in Greenville, Tennessee, and on the way in, they had a sign up in town.
We were approaching the high school, and suddenly, all the black guys, we look on the side of this, look on the side of this old building that had all the, dirty windows, and man, they had it was just like a song. Boom, 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 boom. It was N-word, coon, and there was some things written on the wall. I knew there was gonna be some days like this, but I didn't think it was gonna be today.
We had a rough time in that game because they were very unsportsmanlike, the referees included.
Every time we'd get a drive going, they'd penalize us. One time, they penalized me 30 yards on one play. During the game, they broke into our dressing room and flooded the floor and threw all the boys' clothes in the floor, their coats and ties.
We had to get on out of that city. So we had to make our beeline much faster. We had to get dressed and get on that bus. And once we were on the bus, it was still riot-like things going on,
All the people are ganged around the bus out there, beating on the bus, and And the deputies were standing out there watching, but they wasn't doing anything. And one of the parents from Brevard went down in town and found a Tennessee Highway patrolman and brought him up there and to disperse so we could get out of there. And another thing that happened was any car there that had a North Carolina tag on it, they scratched the paint on it. And my mother's car was there, and they scratched the paint on her car.
Only after we began to win some, not respect, but win some positions, and it looked like we were going to be a first team here or first team there. Then one of the guys that I will never forget, and that's Lord Fisher. Lord Fisher, I think he had a truck, and he would pick us, he would put us all on his truck, and we would ride back to our communities. And I thought that was a great, extension of him saying that he wanted us to be a part of that football team.
When we integrated here, actually the best thing about it was we had absolutely no problem from the kids that came in. They were instructed by their leaders to behave, be good, study, do what they were supposed to do, and they did. And of course we were trying to do the same thing at the same time, and when everybody tries to get along, that makes a difference. Now it wasn't perfect, but it was far different from Union, South Carolina. When I was here in Brevard, I didn't know a Klan existed. I did in South Carolina. First thing I knew. I had two boys that I coached that were, their father was the head of the Klan.
Brookshire was a fair man.
Coach Brookshire, he was quite a leader, and he didn't care if you're black or white. He wanted you to be a good young man and to be a football player.
I guess the thing that impressed me as much about those guys is that they were willing to follow the rules the same as the white kids. And I had one rule where you could not have facial hair, couldn't have beards, and you had to wear your Sunday best when you played away from home. And they all conformed to the rules. We only had 5 or 6 rules, but we all got together and go to church together every Sunday. We had about 40 players on the squad, and the churches knew we were coming, so they would usually reserve seats for us. And we went to Cedar Mountain. We went to the Catholic Church. We went to all of them. We went to the black church the year we integrated, 63. We didn't change. After we integrated, we kept going to all the churches, and the only different thing was Dr. Miller, who was my principal, he suggested that we could possibly get the Ministerial Association to have the churches to write us a letter to invite us to the churches. So we got invitations to all the churches, and after we integrated, we just kept going like we did before. And the only church that we had any objection was so happened that it was a church that my wife and I belonged to, our family. Some of the old timers got up and walked out when we walked in.
For most of us, just something that that we accepted and did. May not understood why, being that we were teenagers, but in the long run, my experience was that it was a time to meet people and see other things. Like I said, that was my first time being in a white church. So to go to a Methodist church and other Baptist churches with different congregation was an experience.
Down in Winston-Salem, in the state playoffs, and we found a place where the players could stay. Was the King Cotton Hotel, which was very expensive. But that was the only place where we found where we could, the black players could stay. We had sports writers and people there from everywhere. I understand that Sports Illustrated had a guy there. One of the sports writers took Keith Elliott by the arm and asked him, he said he wanted to talk to him. So I went over there and I said, what's going on? He said, I want to talk to this guy here, this player here. I said, no. I said, no, you're not going in just pick out one particular player. I said, if you want to talk to any of my players, we'll be up in room so-and-so having a meal after. You can come up there and talk to the whole squad, but you're not going to single out just one ball player. He said, why, you afraid of what he might say? I said, no, I'm not afraid of what he's going to say. And the guy looked at Keith and said, does he treat you different than the white boys? And Keith said, no, sir. He treats us all like dogs. We were going to play Reidsville in Asheville for the championship, and the President Kennedy was assassinated.
1963, November the 22nd. My girls were in the health room. Our principal came and knocked on the door, and instead of just coming on in to see me, he motioned me to come to the door. I did, and he said, Nancy, our President Kennedy has been shot. And I'll never forget that when the school bell rang for the school day to be over, when the students filed out to the buses or to walk home or whatever, nobody was saying a word. So it was up to the North Carolina High School Athletic Association in Chapel Hill to make the call about what would be done. And they're the ones that said, you'll play it tomorrow at Memorial Stadium in Asheville at 1 o'clock. And so we did. And it was more like a wake.
And it was cold and rainy and just a real bad situation. And the whole country was in mourning. So we went over to play, but it was terrible. There wasn't hardly anybody there.
Me as an athlete, I didn't want to play the game. Nobody's heart was in it. I know my heart was not in that game. It was not in the game. It was just something that we had to do.
The game ended in a tie, 0-0. And it was, you know, I would imagine that's the way it should have ended. Neither team played very well. But, you know, I would imagine that even if you'd have won, you'd been hard to celebrate.
Very fitting that we played to a 0-0 tie. Nobody scored. Because I don't think nobody's heart was in it. But I think that we wanted to win. I think both teams wanted to win. And I always thought, even now, did we disrespect the president by playing that game, you know?
Since no rules were in place to play off the tie, they declared us co-champs, North Carolina co-champs. So in a year or two, we had to go to Reidsville for some sort of family reunion. And we drove by the high school, and there was a big board. It said, Reidsville, State 3A champs, 1963. And I thought, what are they talking about? We tied them. We're supposed to be co-champs. In Reidsville, they say they're champs, and we don't even recognize it down here in any way other than just to say the score was 0-0. So he got it straightened out and made a sign down there that I think it just says that we were state champs.
One of the most hurtful things that I've had experienced at Brevard High School was as we were going down this corridor, one of the students come running down the hall and said, now that he's dead, maybe now I hope they just send all of them, you know, all of us back to Africa. The person who said that, I never will forget that. He was one of my teammates on the right-hand side. I think I was playing left, he was playing right. I never will forget that. And to know his feeling, what would drive him, you know, his thought process.
All my money.